go take a look at that. We're drilling. Beautiful. There's something right there. Nice little signal there. Sounds good.
I think we have another stake.
Steak? Oh, look at that.
We're looking for a big flat.
For more than 2 centuries, Oak Island has kept its secrets in silence. Generations have searched, fortunes have vanished, lives have been reshaped by the pursuit. The so-called money pit became a symbol of obsession, a mystery tangled in cave-ins, flooded tunnels, and unanswered questions. But now, something has changed. What many once dismissed as legend has collided with solid evidence. Deep beneath the island's surface, the team has identified a confirmed man-made structure. Not scattered debris, not a natural formation. Something engineered, intentional, hidden. The data leaves little room for doubt. The alignment is precise. The materials are out of place in a way nature cannot explain. For Rick and Marty Lagina, this isn't just another promising lead. It's a turning point. The search is no longer about chasing stories. It's about confronting proof of construction. And here's the part that raises even bigger questions. If this structure is exactly what it appears to be, then someone went to extraordinary effort to build it, protect it, and bury it deep enough to survive centuries untouched. The mystery is no longer about whether something exists underground. It's about who built it, why they hid it, and what they never intended anyone to find. What started as an ordinary morning on the island quickly felt different. The steady hum of machinery echoed as the hammer grab dug into the garden shaft. Dumé contracting wasn't simply removing soil. They were reopening a passageway that hadn't been accessed since the 1700s. At around 23 feet down, the team noticed something unusual. The soil wasn't just wet, it was dense, sticky, tightly compacted. This didn't look like a random collapse. It appeared layered and deliberate, carefully packed backfill. And that realization mattered. If someone had filled it this precisely centuries ago, they were likely protecting something, not hiding empty space. Then came concrete evidence. Timber fragments recovered from the shaft were scientifically dated to 1735. Not speculation, not theory, a confirmed date. As if that weren't enough, water samples taken from below revealed measurable traces of gold, real particles suspended in the water. That kind of result changes the conversation. The garden shaft was no ordinary dig. It was old, thoughtfully constructed, and located only feet away from a previously identified underground void, one that closely matches long-standing theories about hidden chambers or tunnels. Suddenly, the shaft wasn't just another clue. It may be the centerpiece. Marty acknowledged it himself. This site could mark the original money pit or sit directly beside it, possibly the closest physical connection to the truth they've ever had. So the strategy shifted. Instead of drilling from above and speculating, they reinforced the shaft with new 8-foot structural sets, aiming for a depth of 80 feet. For the first time in modern exploration on Oak Island, the plan was simple: go down and see it firsthand. They deployed the Inductance Spectrum 120 camera, a cylindrical device designed to navigate darkness, rotate fully, and illuminate what human eyes cannot reach. As it descended, the live feed revealed narrow corridors, preserved structural walls, and moisture clinging to surfaces untouched for centuries. The space didn't look chaotic. It looked controlled, designed, engineered. Scott Barlow watched the monitor in disbelief. The dimensions were tight and precise, far too consistent to be accidental. Then came a moment decades in the making. Rick Lagina, who first learned about Oak Island as a child, prepared to enter the shaft himself. After more than 50 years of curiosity and relentless pursuit, he was about to step into the very ground that had fueled his imagination. Safety checks were completed, gear secured, the reinforced shaft deemed stable. Slowly and carefully, Rick descended. When his boots touched the bottom, there were no dramatic moments, just silence and history. He stood surrounded by original timbers from the 1700s, clay walls shaped by unknown hands, a space sealed with purpose long before modern machinery existed. In that dim light, it stopped being just an excavation site. It felt like proof. In Rick's voice, there wasn't just excitement, there was reverence. He wasn't chasing treasure. He was stepping into another century. What he saw erased lingering doubt. Ancient wooden braces still intact, earth walls tightly compacted, unmistakable signs of intentional human construction. This was not natural collapse. It was deliberate design. Roger Fortin, who accompanied him into the shaft, pointed out original materials still visible beneath modern reinforcements. This wasn't recent work, it was deep history, and somehow it had endured. At roughly 50 feet down, the team began testing the structure in the simplest way possible, by knocking and listening. Each tap carried a question. Each hollow echo hinted at something beyond. Then they pushed deeper. At 93 feet, everything nearly stopped. The probe drill met resistance, but not rock, not loose debris. It struck solid wood. The drill bit jammed. Operations paused immediately as they cleared the borehole and retrieved the rods. The cuttings were collected, bagged, and examined. There wasn't much visible at first glance, mostly fragments. But then, the drilling foreman made a statement that changed the tone of the room. He was 99.9% certain they had struck a wooden structure along the north side of the shaft. That wasn't speculation. That was contact. Oak Island has never given anything away easily. It doesn't reward you just because you've put in the time. It doesn't ease up because of sacrifice. It keeps buried what it wants buried. And just when the team finally had something solid, measurable, mechanical proof, they were forced to stop. The permits weren't in place to go deeper. The season was ending. Pushing the shaft further would have risked both safety and the future of the entire project. They had a clear target. They had the equipment ready, but they couldn't break through. Rick stood at the bottom of the garden shaft, replaying the memory of Gary's metal detector tone in his mind. That sharp, unmistakable signal, the sound he had waited his whole life to hear. Now it carried a painful edge. They were so close. But Oak Island doesn't just frustrate, it challenges. If they couldn't go down any farther, they would adjust their strategy. Thoughtful analysis instead of brute force. Gary Drayton's CTX-3030 isn't just a hobby detector. It's built to filter out modern interference and tell the difference between worthless iron and precious metal. When it reacted beneath the shaft the way it did, it wasn't random scrap metal. It was something meaningful. The signal was tight and concentrated at the muddy base, framed by heavy timber. The beeps weren't scattered. They were clustered and consistent. That suggests intention. The team also re-examined water samples taken from the same depth. Lab results confirmed elevated traces of gold and silver, verified, not imagined. And those metals weren't washing down from the surface. They were rising from below. Something underground was releasing measurable amounts into the groundwater. Not just microscopic dust, detectable concentrations. Add to that the wooden obstruction the drill had struck, right along the projected path of a tunnel believed to run west toward an anomaly known as the Baby Blob, previously identified by scans as a possible chamber. The drill had confirmed open space in that direction. The garden shaft sat right at the edge of it. They hadn't missed the entry by yards. They had missed it by inches. With options narrowing, Rick and Marty made one final descent that season. Not to excavate, but to observe and absorb what they now understood. They stepped again into the damp, chilled air at the bottom of the shaft. This time, they weren't speculating. They were validating. The beams beneath their boots were centuries old. The preservation was remarkable, as if the thick mud had frozen the space in time. Rick knocked against the wall once more. In certain spots, a hollow echo answered back. Not everywhere, but distinct, controlled voids. They tried again, more firmly. The same contained response. Natural cavities don't produce clean, focused echoes like that. These sounded structured, built. The final moment of the season belonged to Gary. He descended once more with the CTX-3030, while the crew watched closely. Everyone understood. This was it until spring. He swept the base slowly. The detector sounded off. Same location. Same clear, unmistakable tone. Non-ferrous, stable, metallic, possibly gold, possibly silver, maybe both. But without clearance to dig deeper, all they could do was document it. The atmosphere in the shaft felt heavy with unfinished business. Gary stood beside Rick and Marty, the detector humming softly among packed clay and ancient timber. They were standing over something real. Oak Island doesn't erase its secrets. It waits, it tests, and when it reveals even a small piece, it demands patience in return. The garden shaft had become more than just an access point. It felt like a crack in the island's armor, a place where centuries-old intentions were resurfacing. And the signals below weren't fading. Gary's CTX-3030 is calibrated to ignore meaningless chatter. When it rang out at the bottom of that shaft, loud, clean, non-ferrous, it wasn't coincidence. Something of value remains buried there, deep, old, waiting. Rick and Marty stood firmly on those heavy planks, feeling every subtle vibration beneath their boots. They knew exactly where they were, surrounded by history, maybe even treasure, yet unable to reach it. This was no longer just storytelling or legend. It felt like a countdown. As the season closed, the brothers made one final descent together into the garden shaft. 60 years after a 10-year-old Rick first read about Oak Island and let his imagination run wild. Now he stood underground beside his brother, shoulder to shoulder, enclosed by timber older than their nation itself. It wasn't nostalgia, it was personal. This ground had swallowed fortunes. It had tested people. Some left financially ruined, others left emotionally broken. Now the Laginas faced that same darkness, equipped with advanced technology, yes, but driven by the same relentless determination. Rick said it plainly. We're at the base of the old shaft. If anything was dropped, it's here. The wood beneath them told its own story. These beams weren't random debris. They were cut, aligned, and positioned with purpose. This wasn't a collapse. It was construction, the kind built to protect something meant to stay hidden. Then came the detail that changed everything. According to the shaft crew, everything below the newly installed supports, everything Rick and Marty were standing on, was original, untouched, preserved for centuries in thick clay and oxygen-starved mud. A sealed environment, a time capsule, and likely not one meant to hold ordinary objects. Throughout the season, the team had relied on sonar and seismic imaging across the Money Pit area. They mapped voids, traced anomalies, and identified what appeared to be a chamber around 95 feet down. The data suggested a tunnel running west, directly from where the garden shaft now stands. That alignment wasn't random. The drill struck wood because they had reached the edge of that passage. The same area triggered Gary's detector, and that was precisely where time forced them to stop. But just because excavation paused didn't mean the work ended. Off the island, the team reviewed everything. They reviewed everything carefully. Footage examined frame by frame, lab reports rechecked, core samples analyzed again, acoustic data studied in detail. This time, they weren't going to skim past the target. Next season, they wouldn't drill beside the suspected tunnel. They would aim straight into it. Winter wasn't a break. It was planning season. Permits were secured, strategies refined, calculations adjusted. Because that metallic signal beneath the garden shaft wasn't an isolated reading. Expanded scans revealed multiple nearby areas with concentrated metal signatures. Not just particles dissolved in groundwater, but metals embedded within layers of soil. The team referred to it as a gold signature. And these weren't random traces. They were clustered and focused. That suggested containment, possibly even storage. Whatever was down there didn't appear accidental. Speculation naturally reignited. The Knights Templar, Spanish treasure fleets, hidden vaults. But for the team, the labels didn't matter. Evidence did, and the evidence was growing stronger. When Dumay Contracting wrapped up for the season, they left behind more than equipment. They left the most advanced underground access system Oak Island had ever seen. A stabilized shaft reinforced to 80 feet ready for expansion into surrounding voids. When spring arrived, they wouldn't be starting over. They would be continuing. Every beam, every brace, every reinforcement remained in place, waiting like the island itself. For generations, this search had been fueled by obsession. For decades, it had relied on stories, old maps, and fragments of legend. Now the clues weren't vague or faded. They were directly beneath the boots of a team closer than anyone before them. That shadow captured on the high-definition camera wasn't just a shape. It was possibility. Only a few feet of dense mud and aging timber separated them from whatever lay below. The question had permanently changed. It was no longer if something was there. It was what would happen when it finally reached daylight. But Oak Island always demands one final test. As the season ended, operations had to shut down. Regulations, weather, safety concerns, and always time. So they stepped away. But this time, they didn't leave discouraged. In past seasons, they left frustrated. Now, they left energized. Winter wouldn't slow their momentum. It would sharpen it. Because when they returned, the garden shaft wouldn't just be another excavation site. It would be the launch point. And the next descent wouldn't be cautious. It would be decisive. The plan was clear. Go directly at the target. The next drilling phase wouldn't circle the anomaly. It would penetrate it. The suspected box-shaped formation beneath the garden shaft was now the top priority. Gary Drayton's CTX-3030 would be upgraded with water-capable coils designed to function flawlessly in saturated, mineral-heavy soil. If precious metals were present, they wouldn't escape detection again. Not this time. For the first time in years, the search wasn't scattered across multiple areas of the island. It had narrowed, focused, sharpened like a beam of light. Every chart, every seismic scan, every lab result pointed back to the same place, the base of the garden shaft. All roads led down. Even Marty, often the cautious counterbalance to Rick's optimism, acknowledged it openly. The data was no longer vague. Something intentional existed beneath that shaft. Something designed, constructed, concealed. And now they had the tools to confront it. Future boreholes wouldn't be blind attempts. Fiber optic cameras and robotic probes would travel through them, transmitting live images. This wasn't instinct-driven digging anymore. It was underground reconnaissance. Instead of drilling straight down and hoping to hit something, the team planned to branch outward, creating a grid of observation points below the surface. A network of mechanical eyes scanning for voids, structures, and unmistakable signs of human engineering. The mission had shifted into verification mode. The world's most famous treasure hunt was no longer chasing rumors. It was validating evidence. Then came unexpected news. Canadian authorities, recognizing both the historical importance of the reconstructed shaft and the scientific data gathered so far, granted provisional approval for advanced subterranean investigation. That meant less delay, less red tape. When the ground thawed, work could resume immediately. For Rick, that wasn't just permission. It was momentum. He began assembling the full team: Dumé drill operators, scanning specialists, geologists, artifact experts. The next phase wouldn't simply explore the shaft. It would document every inch. Everything would be mapped, recorded, and analyzed in real time. Nothing overlooked. Local First Nations communities were consulted as well, ensuring cultural and historical respect remained central to the operation. Because by now, the team understood something important. This wasn't only about treasure. It was about history. And if that rectangular outline truly proved to be a container, a box deliberately placed and preserved, the impact would reach far beyond Oak Island. It would ripple through archaeology, challenge textbooks, and reshape long-held historical narratives. The final strategy meeting of the season carried no sense of defeat, no exhaustion. It carried anticipation. Rick stood and spoke, not about endings, but about chapters. He reminded the team that the story began centuries before any of them were born. But maybe, just maybe, they were the ones meant to close it. Is this the moment Oak Island finally reveals its greatest secret? Or will the next descent uncover something even bigger? Something history itself hasn't prepared us for? Let us know what you think. And if you want to follow every twist of this unfolding mystery, be sure to subscribe to the Timefold channel and don't forget to like.